So Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is out in just 2 or 3 days now, depending on where you are in the world. It's set to be one of the biggest and most anticipated games in 2024, and as I always do in the lead up to any launch here on the channel, today we're going over everything you need to know about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, firstly, in terms of all just the basic boring info, just to get it out of the way, the game is a PS5 exclusive, so it will be available on only the PS5 and not even the PS4 or anything else. It is just launching on next gen, and it will be launching on February 29th. Now, I've done a full breakdown for each edition, so be sure to go and check that out for all of the details, but there are 2 different editions of the game, the standard and deluxe editions, which come in at $70 US and $100 US respectively. Both then also come with the twin editions, which actually include Final Fantasy VII Remake in them as well, completely for free, as the twin editions are the same as just the regular versions. So they've kind of got a bunch of different versions there, but realistically there is just the standard and deluxe editions. And then there is also the collector's edition too, which comes with everything that the deluxe edition has, but it also comes with a really awesome Sephiroth statue that people can add to their collection. Now, something very important to note about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is that even though it is a sequel to the remake from 2020, which is then a remake from the 1997 PS1 original, the producer of the game has come out and said that you don't need to have played the 1997 original or the 2020 remake in order to play this game, saying, quote, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is being designed so that people can enjoy the game whether they know the original game or not. Now, that is obviously a very exciting proposition for anyone who is newer to Final Fantasy. For me, for example, I had actually never played any Final Fantasy games before actually playing the demo for Rebirth, at which point I really enjoyed it, and I'm now in the midst of playing the remake as well. But the great thing is that, like the producer said, I didn't have to have played the remake to actually get into the franchise initially, even though I'd only played the demo, so it's not like I played the entire game or anything like that. But that is absolute proof that if you guys have never played Final Fantasy, you don't need to feel as though you're missing out on parts of the story and you just, it's too late to get into the franchise or anything like that. That is not the case whatsoever. Every single Final Fantasy game is its own, I guess, separate entity from each other. They're not all tied together. They do often all have the same characters and stuff like that involved, but they're all their own complete different stories. So if you guys have never played Final Fantasy, this is still a really good place to get in. And it's not like, even if you haven't played the remake, you can't play this one. You can definitely play this, and then you can always go back and play the remake afterwards as well, playing that as a prequel rather than playing them in release order. Now, like I just touched on, there is already a demo out if you guys didn't know that already. It is completely free, so it is definitely worth downloading and playing if you want to see whether or not you do like this game, and obviously that can save you a bit of money. If you play it and you just don't enjoy it, well, you've saved yourself a bit of money there, and if you play it and you really enjoy it, then you might know that you want to buy the full game. That demo is roughly 2 hours long, and the progress will actually carry over to the main game as well if you do buy it, so you won't have to replay the opening 2 hours again. It'll just carry off from pretty much where you left in that demo. Now, before we go any further, if you guys are interested in more Final Fantasy VII Rebirth content and you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There is plenty more content on the way once the game is out in, like I said, just a few days from now, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, a lot of other Final Fantasy games do have more like turn-based type of gameplay in terms of the older ones anyway, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is more of that typical open world RPG type of game with the typical combat you would expect in any of those games too. It was much the same in the remake, and then even with Final Fantasy XVI that came out last year, that type of combat was pretty much the same as this. So if you're not too much of a fan of the like turn-based games, then don't worry, as this is not like a lot of the other Final Fantasy games in that sense, and that is just another reason why, if you are new to the franchise and you're looking to, play one of these games but you're not sure where to get in, then Rebirth is actually still a really solid place to get in, even though on paper it doesn't sound like it, just due to the fact that it is part 2 of a 3-part story that's a remake of an original. It sounds very daunting and almost confusing, to be honest, but it is actually a really good place to get into the franchise. Now, touching more on the gameplay, the combat is really fun from what I've experienced in the demo so far. It is very Souls-like in terms of its fundamentals. The dodge, block, and parry system is very prevalent here, but the Souls-like comparison sort of ends there because the rest of the gameplay and combat is very different than a Souls-like. On top of just the typical dodge, block, and parry system that's there is plenty of different stuff you can do in that combat as well. There are plenty of abilities to use. You can use spells and stuff like that. There are actually multiple different attack types as well. So there's the operator mode, which is essentially just the standard attack type, but there is then the Punisher mode, which is almost like you change your stance into like a heavy attack and you'll deal more damage, but you're a little bit slower in that mode. The gameplay overall, and especially the combat, is actually very deep, and it starts out very basic with the fundamentals. Therefore, it is very easy to learn this game and kind of just focus on those basics. If you just want to literally dodge and attack, you can play the entire game by just doing that. But for those of you who also enjoy the ins and outs of, you know, the more intricate gameplay across a ton of different games, then this also does have that too, where there are plenty of different ways to play. It has a very high skill ceiling where you can get really good at this game using a bunch of different ways to attack enemies and all that kind of thing. So it is very fleshed out gameplay, at least from what I've experienced anyway. And I think a lot of people, if you enjoy that typical RPG type of gameplay, you are definitely going to enjoy this game. To add to that even further, there is a new addition to the game as well in the form of the new synergy skills that are kind of like duo finishes between you and any of the different party members in your party. It's not always guaranteed to be a finisher, as in like it's going to be a one-hit kill on the enemies and stuff like that. So finisher is probably not the best way to describe it, but that is the easiest way to explain it, that you can kind of just do these big team ups with any of your other party members where it'll be almost a little bit more cinematic and shows this awesome attack that you and your teammates are going to do. That deals heaps and heaps of damage, and there's actually completely different synergy skills between each of your different party members, not only with say Cloud and Barrett, but also with Barrett and Tifa. You can have completely different synergy skills between each of those characters, and even between the same characters there's actually multiple different ones you can choose from. So this is definitely an awesome new addition to the game that I think is going to just add another awesome way to play Final Fantasy VII. On top of that too, you can also switch between all of your different party members as well. So even though Cloud is the main character, you don't actually have to play as Cloud the whole game, and realistically you could almost kind of main whoever you want the entire game. Sure, there will definitely be sections, and we even see that in the demo, where you do have to play as Cloud. But if the game is going to be roughly 40 hours long, for example, there is a chance that for 35 of those hours, you can actually play as a completely different character. And I think that is an awesome way to play the game. For any of you who just don't like Cloud, or you want to just focus on another character that you like even more, which is something you don't often see a lot of other games doing. Now, in terms of the estimated time to beat that I did actually just roughly touch on, they have said that the game is around 40 hours for the main story, and this is according to the producer of the game. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because those numbers are almost always inflated. If a game says 40 hours, it's probably closer to 30 for people who actually just focus on the story. As an example, earlier this year I played The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered for the second time, and they always say that that game is roughly 25 hours, but according to all of my recordings of the game, because I filmed the game from start to finish, it only took me 16 hours, and that's with me checking literally every room to get as much ammo and stuff as I could, because I was playing on one of the harder difficulties. I did not by any means rush the game, as in just run from point A to point B and try and get to the next cutscene or anything like that. I played it at a pretty regular pace, and it took me 16 hours to finish a game. That they always say the main story, if you just focus on that, it will take you 25 hours. So like that with this game, take it with a grain of salt. They've said 40 hours. It's probably closer to around 30. But with that being said, usually a game that they say is around 40 hours for the main story, that generally means the entire game is like 70 to 100 hours for all the side content and the trophies and stuff like that as well. So this is no doubt going to be an absolutely huge game. Anything that gets close to that 100-hour mark is always going to be a lot of fun for those of you who enjoy sinking plenty of time into a game. So expect there to be plenty of stuff to do in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, in order to have that much content, there obviously has to be a very solid size map, and the map size in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth looks absolutely enormous. You can see here that there are multiple entire continents to play on. Now, it's hard to judge the actual size of those continents. We don't know if they're in relation to an actual continent on planet Earth, or if these are just like super small continents and the entire planet that this game is set on is small. We can't really tell until we're actually in the game. But just at face value, looking at the map, it looks absolutely enormous. There are 8 different regions that we get to play in, and if you want a full breakdown of that, there is actually a video on the channel as well going through all of the stuff we learned about the map and going through all the regions and all that kind of thing, so be sure to check that one out as well. Now, in terms of the, I guess, RPG side of the story, there is definitely a lot of RPG elements within this game. There is a new system that they've added that was not in the remake, which is called the Folio skill tree. Now, this allows you to actually level your entire squad separate from the individual skill trees. So this is essentially a skill tree for your party as a whole, and the actions and the interactions you have with different party members can actually affect your party level and therefore negatively or positively impact gameplay between you and the rest of your party, which is an awesome touch, and I cannot wait to dive into that and see how that plays out. They've pretty much said that the closer that you are with your party, as in the more close-knit that whole group is, the better that is going to be for your gameplay, the more skills you're going to be able to unlock, and the more, I guess, combos and all that kind of thing you're going to be able to do with your party. And that is something you don't often see in these sorts of games. So like I said, very keen to get stuck into this, and there will definitely be content on the channel going through all the awesome stuff we can do with this once the game is finally here. Now, another RPG element is called Materia, which is kind of like a perk system in a way. It is different kinds of like magic that you can pick up throughout your journey. And while you pick these up, you can then chop and change and apply this to your different weapons and stuff like that. And it creates different effects or bonuses to those weapons and therefore affects your gameplay as well. So that is another typical RPG type of element you would expect to see in other games, but they've done it in a way in this game that really does build on the lore of the game and the world as a whole. Overall, the game looks very, very promising to me. I would honestly be shocked if this doesn't end up in the Game of the Year discussion come December, whether it's to actually win Game of the Year or just in the conversation to be nominated at the very least. It is obviously a beloved franchise. It's one of the most loved franchises in all of gaming, and Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Remake have both been received so incredibly well, not only by the old hardcore fans, but also a lot of new fans as well. They seem to be bringing in a lot of new players with both of those most recent games, and no doubt with Rebirth as well. And so, like I said, whether you are an old school fan of Final Fantasy or whether you've never played any of these games at all, I genuinely do think that Rebirth is going to be a great time for each of those different situations. But that is it for everything you need to know about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. If there's anything you guys think I missed, be sure to let me know down in the comments section. And keep your eyes peeled on the channel after launch for plenty of different tips and tricks type of content as well. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.